Welcome to the Low Tox Life podcast.
Our philosophy on our farm now is we actually grow grass for the earth and for our animals. So it's both what we're feeding the earth and the animals. So that's a massive part of how we see our job, using grazing animals to heal the earth.
I'm Alex Stewart, your host, founder of Low Tox Life. Some of my favourite shows over the years have been with farmers, and Lawson and Laura from Margaret River Organic Farmer over in Western Australia is no different. In learning about how they are healing the planet from the ground up, from the little parcel that they're on, for the benefit of all the food that is grown there and the nutrition that is in it, for the benefit of the eaters and how we feel, knowing where our food comes from, for the benefit of the animals, for the benefit of the health of the crops. I mean, it's just always so nice. I'm always filled with hope. My second book, Low Tox Life Food, speaks to regenerative organic farming and some of the pioneers, some of the indigenous methods, and how it makes a huge difference to the health of the planet and to the stability of the climate if we can get behind more farming done like this. So I truly hope you enjoy the show, and over to our show partners who help us put this show on every single week and help you with your low tox swaps. If a healthy home is your priority right now, then AusClimate, our major podcast partner, without whom we could not put this show on every week, has got you covered with 10% off for Aussies. Code LowToxLife. Dehumidifying is a particular passion of mine because it helps us prevent moisture, excess humidity, and of course, therefore, mold in our indoor environments. Of course, if you ever have a leak or a flood, contact a mold technician or a building biologist. But for everyday living, you would be surprised the impact that good dehumidification can make in your indoor environment. I've done a ton of reels on this to help you know how long, what size of unit, how many units, different floor plans. Everything's there on my Instagram at LowToxLife, and you'll see all the white background tiles are part of a humidity literacy series. I hope it helps you. Head to ausclimate.com.au. They have heating and cooling solutions, amazing dehumidifiers, and their Winix air purifier range. Hello, Laura and Lawson. How are you both doing?
Hello, Alex. We're really good. Thank you for inviting us to join you.
I'm so thrilled to have this opportunity. If there's one thing the Low Tox community loves, it's our episodes that we do with people who are farming and doing wonderful things for the planet from the ground up while feeding people nutritious food. I think there's something about it that just makes everyone feel like, okay, everything's going to be all right. There's people like that doing that kind of work out there, and that makes me feel very safe. So,
Amazing. And we
yes, no,
need
go
you
for it.
guys. We need the tribe. So without the tribe of people who are, helping us move forward, then yeah, we couldn't work at all. So
Exactly, right?
thank
Farmers
you.
need eaters and eaters
Yep,
need
that's
farmers. It's literally as simple as that. And I really love opening the lines of communication up, because when you think about governments and policy and voting and lefts and rights, we often end up being inadvertently divided, and it just should not be that way, because we're all team human, team planet. And so I think these
yeah.
conversations really help us realize all the overlaps and the interdependencies that help us actually connect better. And so, speaking of connecting, how did you two connect first? Lawson, do you want to tell the story?
Oh, Laura she can
Ah.
tell that one.
Oh, well, I guess um, to place myself in this country, you might be able to hear from my voice that I'm
Hmm.
from overseas. I was born in the UK in a wood into a family that were really into self-sufficiency, and so they gave me the gift of appreciating nature. But I never really got growing things until I spent some time traveling as a woofer, a willing worker on organic farms, and that really just it hooked me. From there I discovered permaculture, and studied that system of living likely on the planet. And I found this beautiful place, Wodandi Budja, otherwise known as Wujidupbilya, Margaret River in Western Australia, about 20 years ago. And yeah, I went back to my roots in education and spending time on community projects. The grassroots change is really important to me. I met Lawson, and he's also someone who likes to think deeply and do good, and that was it. Yeah, we moved to the farm, and here we are 10 years later with 3 kids and a myriad of other creatures that we nurture.
You've been very busy in that decade of work. Lawson, your side of the story. What is your history? Did you grow up in a wood with a self-sufficient family as well, or was your tragedy? Yeah.
I grew up in Western Victoria on a conventional sheep and cattle and grain farm. It was definitely conventional, but when I look back at it now, I feel like there was a lot of thought around not overgrazing and looking after what we had, as opposed to a lot of the conventional sort of mindset is if you don't use what's there, you miss out. Whereas our philosophy on our farm now is we actually grow grass for the earth and for our animals. So it's both what we're feeding the earth and the animals. So that's a massive part of how we see our job, using grazing animals to heal the earth. And so from there, I studied viticulture at Charles Sturt Uni, and that was all conventional. We learnt about chemicals in some of our courses, and I guess I didn't really think of it too much at the time. But then once I got into the industry, I was horrified by the amount of chemicals that we used in the winemaking industry.
Yeah.
So from that point on, I moved into organic and biodynamic viticulture, where I practiced that, specialised in that for around 15 years, using all sorts of biological farming methods. So I studied mushumus and a myriad of biological farming practices, and I sort of I came out of that experience with a lot of knowledge and also a way of sort of using those as tools for our toolbox to run our farm organically, which we've been doing for about 10 years now.
Amazing. And why did you choose the location you did?
Well, I moved to Margaret River straight from uni to work in the wine industry, and that's one of the problems with Margaret River. Once you've lived here, it's an awesome place. So it was hard to leave, especially in the wine industry, being so close to the coast. It ticked a lot of boxes as far as agriculture or horticulture goes. So
yeah, nice. Yeah. And so you start to work together, but you've both got these sort of different expertises and passions. Laura, can I throw to you to see where permaculture came in for you and the desire to educate in that space?
Sure. Well, it's a way of coexisting animals, humans, and people, accepting that nature is basically the model that we need to work from. The systems that nature teaches us are, when we listen and we look and we research and we can try to understand, we can apply those to our lives, to the way that we do everything. So it's a fabulous way of being. I mean, it takes organics kind of as the basis for everything, and I guess that's what we do too. Organics is basically just the start of the story. We have it in our name. We're Margaret River Organic Farmer, but it's not the end of the story. It kind of branches out far and wide from there. It's basically our maxim is to first do no harm. Yeah, that's just the beginning. We then bring in, as Lawson was saying, all these different things, biodynamics, holistic management, agroforestry, and then recently we've been blessed to have Tarwin Park training over here on the farm for 4 days doing their course on natural sequence farming. And so that for us was a fantastic thing, because we've looked at all of these different trainings over the years, and the natural sequence farming, gosh, that's where we've got to start. That's where farmers need to.
Yeah, it's incredible. And for listeners who don't know that term, haven't heard of it, I urge you to look up Peter Andrews, thought to be a bit of a godfather of natural sequence farming here in Australia. here. Lawson, did you want to share a bit more about that method and how you found it to be so beneficial on the land that you were stewards of?
So apart from all the other farming and biological courses that I've done, and since moving to the farm, I guess we had all these ideas about where we should plant things, what to plant, what animals, how to graze our animals, and they've all been amazing courses and amazing foundations for us to get our farm started. And we've seen amazing results with putting those things into practice. But I guess with natural sequence farming, it felt like it was where you need to start, because it's all about hydrating the landscape. If your landscape isn't hydrated, then you're missing out on a whole lot of potential and health.
You're missing out on
And
building
also,
resilience,
energy
right?
resilience, sure, yeah. And it's that resilience to get through those drier periods either side of your wet seasons that makes a massive difference to your potential on a farm, and also the life and the health of your soil. So I guess I've always been aware of Peter Andrews' work, and I've been to Malone Institute in near Canberra where he's done some good work, and I've seen his work on telly. But once we sort of dug a lot deeper in the natural sequence farming course, and I guess that's what really made an impact on me to see that, okay, so if we put these things in place to start with, then the other things will actually work better, and
Yeah,
the whole
it's like if you
system will
get
work better.
this happening first,
Yes,
everything
yeah,
else is actually able to be done, as
yeah,
opposed to setting other things up
sure,
first and then you fail
yes,
because the water's
yeah,
not right.
yeah, and where, we've always talked to people about when we have farm tours and things, we need our country, our farms are farming. Ultimately, farms are responsible for 62% of Australia. It's super important to get it right. That's going to make it's great having national parks, but if we're looking at 62% of Australia, which is actually the most damaged part of Australia, that's actually what we need to work on. Like that's a
Yeah.
crucial part of the puzzle. So, and that's
And
what
we're not just feeding Australians as well, we're actually feeding a lot of people around the
sure.
world. Yeah.
Yes. So that's what we like. We had already showing people that having mulch on the ground and ground cover and is such a benefit in holding moisture and feeding your microbes and keeping your soil healthy. But then the natural sequence farming was the layer on top of that, I think, and also helps you work out how you would set your farm out as well. Because one of the big things that we learned early on from Joel Salatin and Darren Doherty,
with the regret.
yeah, most of these people say don't really put any infrastructure in place for a few years on your farm before you get a feel of how it's going to work and how the best place to put fences and etc. But I think if you can do the natural sequence farming first, then it's going to be a lot harder after you've done all those things if then you do try and implement natural sequence farming with contours. So yeah.
And if you had in the audience listening right now farmers and I often speak to farmers, and it's often one person in the partnership who really wants to change things and move away from conventional, and they're seeing inspiring stories on Landline and Australian Story, and they've read Charles Massey's book, but the partner's like, no, thank you. And this is how it has to work, and this is how I've been doing it for 3 generations. Have you had conversations, either of you or both, with farmers to help, to actually have those light bulb moments, the first moment where they go, oh yeah, that sounds like a pretty good idea. I hadn't thought of it that way. I'm always fascinated by what light bulb moments are for different people and why. Can you share any that come to mind in your conversations? Forest Superfoods is back as a podcast partner, giving you 10% off with every new subscription. You're also going to get a surprise. Every month that you have an active subscription, you will receive either a mini luxe-sized sample from their supplement range, or a gift card, or their brilliant balms. I have subscribed ever since they first partnered with us because I use moringa powder. I love their Naked Greens blend. It's cruciferous free, which really suits my body. And we use lion's mane. So it made sense to be a subscriber because you get that 10% off, and we really love the quality and their super flexi subscription. Often I don't need everything that we use, so it's very easy to jump into your account, swap something out. They even have a button that says swap for something else this month, which I love. You don't need a special code. There's no special link. Lion's mane, I mentioned there, is great for boosting brain power and overall brain health. It's Australian grown, whole mushroom plus mycelium. The research is showing that you have a more powerful delivery when you include both. There are no flavors, grown organically by industry experts for the past 7 years. That one I wanted to feature because it's one that we've been loving the past few months. But head over to Forest Superfoods, check out the range, become a subscriber, and be rewarded every month with something fabulous to try.
Oh, well, we part of what we do is we do farm tours, and you know, and we feed people. That's two of the real ways for people to truly get an understanding is to see it and to eat it.
Yeah, totally. And the best way to someone's heart is through their stomach, after all. So
Absolutely, absolutely. And we've had several aha moments from folks who've come with us and walked around the farm, and just saying, I can actually leave pasture residue. I could just move my animals with a single wire. You know, I don't need to spend thousands of dollars on refencing and, you know, because some of these things, you know, breaking up your paddocks to be able to holistically manage your animals, that's what we're trying to do because it's not the how, sorry, it is the how, it's not the cow. You know,
yeah, exactly.
we've got to try and be moving our animals to fresh pasture all the time, but we can do that so easily with very little infrastructure at all. So yeah, it's great to have those aha moments happening.
Yeah, and to help fellow farmers save cash on something
for
that is
sure.
often the margins are just
Yes.
awful and it's really tough, and you hear so many stories of people feeling like they're going backwards. What are some of those shortcuts that are actually better for the farmer and the business and the planet and the animals, it turns out? Can you give us a window into a couple more examples there?
I guess for me, you know, we started with a pretty much a zero budget, so we just had to use what we had. And I think for me that's been really rewarding, just because you make do with what you have. For example, on our block and our neighbour's block, which we lease, it's about 100 acres of grazing land, and we have about 30 paddocks, 1 hectare paddocks within that 150 odd hectares. So we have one trough that we use for those 30 paddocks. So that is a massive saving. We move the trough and we plug it in wherever we move the trough, and the cattle move and the trough moves. So that's a massive saving. Because I think that's the thing, like when farmers hear about, well, we have to have an extra 20 paddocks and wow, we have to get water for all those paddocks and the fencing. It's like, well, you don't have to. There's other ways of doing things, but unless they actually see it, or, you know, someone sort of explains it can be a bit easier than the traditional way of doing things, then that's one example. I mean, like Laura was mentioning, we just use one hot wire for our cattle, which is that's pretty minimal. We use Rio bar for our temporary fence posts, which is a pretty cheap alternative to normal fence posts. And funnily enough, everyone talks about kangaroos and how they can break your fences and things. Our kangaroos have actually learnt over a period of probably the first 12 months was a bit dodgy, but then after that, they all know now they just hop under the wire. They don't go through it. And I guess that's part of our philosophy as well. We're farming for all the animals here. We're not just farming for sheep and cattle, the animals, our domestic animals. Like we consider how the kangaroo is going to move through our farm. Where are the quail going to live? You know, what habitat do they need to live on our farm? Because we want the animals to live on our farm, not just to be, you know, in the bush somewhere or in some fenced off area. Like we actually want them to be within our paddocks and happy there, because all animals, farming for everyone. I believe it's our responsibility as farmers to make decisions around all the creatures, because it's all about biodiversity at the end of the day as well.
I was
They
going to
help us.
say, Yeah.
They help
And
us, all
they've
their
all got
interactions and their
jobs.
manure. They all have
Yeah.
jobs. The kangaroos, they live in our paddocks. They spread their manure, and just them being part of our farm helps the different biology that are associated with those guys. And the quail, we have long grass in some. We have eco habitat paddocks which we only graze once or twice a year. So there's always a lot of standing hay in there and reeds, and we have quail flying around in there, and that's pretty cool to see the life coming back to your farm. And that's only just management decisions. It's not we plant some of these areas that I'm talking about. We haven't planted hundreds of trees or shrubs. We have in some parts of our farm, but these areas essentially to most people you think was just a paddock. But because we've managed it differently, the life comes back to those areas. And you have raptors flying over there, mice and mice, because there's habitat for all the animals, and it actually creates food for. There's hundreds of swallows that are they're aerial insectivores, so they need obviously a lot of insects flying around, and that comes with the plants going through their full life cycle. So you need plants that are fully recovered and flowering and have seeds for the other insects to be happy. Then the other birds, you have that layered effect of biodiversity and ecology. So it's been pretty interesting just making those just management decisions
And
about how long animals are there, and how much recovery time we give paddocks.
I love that. And, in a university context of agriculture where you do spend a lot of time learning about chemicals and pest management. And look, I'm not one of those purity testing people that thinks it has to be all or nothing. And there's always going to be that one situation that I spoke to Rob from Cobram Estate, a huge olive plantation. And he openly admits that while 95% of the property is organically managed and run, there will be a breakout of something sometimes, and there will just be a need to do that to rescue everything. And I just think we often purity test like perfection, and then it stops people from actually trying their best to do their best to minimize chemical inputs. And what you're talking about there makes me want to ask a question around pests and how biodiversity and improving the ecological network actually also improves your pest management by default, right? Can you unpack that a little bit? Because I think a lot of people struggle to get their heads around how more creatures and insects is better. Like a lot of traditional farm thinking would be that makes things harder to control, so I don't want that.
Sure.
It's about balance, isn't it?
Yeah. Well, nature doesn't have if you look at nature, it doesn't really have outbreaks of any particular pest because everything's balanced. So, and that essentially is what we're trying to bring that. I guess I'm always thinking of how would nature be in this situation. So if your default is to go back to that, then you're always going to work towards that. So by letting our paddocks recover and letting all the plants grow, we're creating food for all the different organisms and all the different creatures that require those different plants and plants at different growth stages to thrive, and therefore they balance each other out. So it was like
nothing can become overrun
nothing can
in a network like that.
Yeah, you've got enough ladybirds to be your
the fungus.
predatory insects. There's enough spiders to eat other insects. Well, I've counted a few years ago. I counted up to at least one spider web per square meter in one of our paddocks. So that's equivalent of like 10,000 spider webs or spiders in a hectare. That's to sit and spot. They're an indication of that. There's plenty of other insects for those guys to be happy. So you start to see those things balancing out,
and then the birds will be happy, and it goes on. And
that's what I try to in traditional viticulture, where you see perfect rows and everything looks perfect. The middle of the vineyard rows are manicured, and under the vines there's no grass, it's sprayed. And that's actually the opposite way. Like when I managed vineyards, I actually went to the opposite of that. I wanted everything to grow, and I wanted whenever I drive past vineyards now, there's more and more of them, which is awesome. But the messier the vineyard, the more biodiversity there is, the less insect problems they have. So
of course.
it's just about having biodiversity ultimately. If you can have that, it's going to reduce to a fairly big degree on your pest. Having a monoculture. Ultimately, we're trying to get away from a monoculture.
Yeah.
as soon as you have a monoculture, you've got a problem because that's where you're going to have outbreaks of anything because that's what they want.
Mm.
Whereas when you've got biodiversity, you're going closer to nature, and then that's where you have a balance.
Yeah, love it.
And
And
and the same with weeds as well.
I was
You
going to
know,
ask about
Mm.
weeds, so go for it, Laura.
yeah,
Explain.
they're all just plants
Mm.
doing their thing where they're meant to, and they're performing a particular function. For example, we've got a nearby neighbour who has got a special derogation to go and spray out this flatweed, which is in the dandelion family.
Hmm.
And it's just crazy because we see our animals going, when they go to fresh pasture, they go straight to that flatweed because they innately know that that brings them all sorts of minerals. With the long taproot, it's fabulous for soil and it actually mines those minerals. It brings those minerals up and improves their health, which, in turn improves ours. So weeds all have a function too. I guess it's the balance again.
Mm. So
Um,
have you talked to that neighbour about that particular derogation they have? How's that go down if you try and bring it
Wow.
up?
we've tried.
Okay. And we're leaving that there, I gather.
We need to.
Yeah.
We
Yeah,
need to. Okay. But
mm,
I mean, it's such a great example, isn't it? Like one man's trash is another man's treasure if you understand it deeply enough and
Yeah.
what to do with it.
And it
yeah.
flowers like dandelion or the flatweed. It flowers most of summer. So there's always there's flowers all the time. So your bees are happy. All the other insects associated with that. It's not just it's doing multiple functions. So
Mm. Yeah.
mm.
And so in that situation, is it commonplace at this point to try and offer, do you want us to send our cattle there to go and clean it up for you?
I guess it's a bit of a logistics
Mm.
situation to be able to just do that. And, you have to make sure that everyone has yards. And there's not too many people that are happy just to have someone else's animals on their land unless it's some sort of business arrangement, to be honest.
Hmm.
So, I mean, I'm lucky enough at the eco village in Margaret River where I've been able to run cattle over the last 4 or 5 years on the ag plots. And that's been a nice relationship with me in that because they haven't been able to manage they have 1 hectare blocks, but they have no animals, they have no experience. Some people aren't even going to do anything with them for a few years. So I was able to run some cattle there and save them burning diesel to slash them. And the cattle came in. We gave them tickets to our farm tours and some produce, and they were as happy as anything. And I was happy. Our cattle were getting some really fresh, really high protein feed.
Mm.
And yeah, so there are some situations where I've been able to do that. But I suppose just to move cattle somewhere for a week or something, it's a bit of a balance between is it worth the energy
Yeah.
and yeah, so
Yeah, but it does
mm,
speak to the promise of interconnected communities, which is
mm,
such a permaculture
yeah,
principle, isn't it? It's like,
yeah,
how can we all support everybody and this
yeah,
ecosystem that we're all looking after? Maybe it's idealistic of me to like think of things that way, but I would like to think that we could have these relationships where it's like, well, what do you need? Well, what do you need? Well,
yeah,
and how can I help? And if we're all coming at it from how can I help rather than what are you trying to do? This really defensive
yeah,
kind of separatist idea in farming communities, which often exists. Like there are amazing relationships, and then there are these old, closed ideas of, well, that's mine and that's yours, and we don't,
Yeah.
overstep that boundary, literally.
It takes the village, doesn't it?
It does.
We were so blessed to have a lovely neighbour that lent us her tractor for the first
yeah,
5 years, I think, that
Oh,
we
yeah,
were
I
here.
love it.
And yeah, it
yeah.
was, we couldn't have done it without
Mm.
her. It's yeah, it really does take the village.
It does. Laura, you said towards the start, at first we try to do no harm. We do no harm. And often there's this philosophical question around food, farming, and the inclusion of animals. And, if you look at nature, like sometimes, if you go camping or hiking, you see some pretty like things that look really violent in nature and quite harmful in terms of one creature to another. But they're all doing their jobs in nature to eat and to survive. How do you reconcile that? It's almost better to think of everything as a species, plant or animal, because then it actually just all makes a lot more sense. I'd love your
Breaks it
thoughts on
down.
that.
Yeah, it's interesting, and particularly for me with what we're actually doing, our produce, protein. I'm what I term as a recovering vegetarian. Not that I think there's anything wrong
Oh,
with
interesting.
vegetarianism.
Mm.
I ate one too many dodgy sausage when I was 12 and stopped eating meat at that point, up until when we moved to the farm. So this is a huge learning curve for me to be raising our animals. A lot of them have names. Our kids
Mm.
have bestowed a lot of the animals with names. Just to, I mean, personally, I have reconciled with eating meat because I now know the provenance. I know exactly where that animal was born, how that animal has lived, what it has eaten, how it's been taken care of. Yeah, and through to the other end of things too. We used to home kill, but now that we sell our produce, we have to go through correct procedures of using the abattoirs and the butcher. All of those stages, we try to do the best we possibly can, and
Mm.
I'm okay with it,
Yeah.
and feeling good both mind and body. And it's great to show our kids these life cycles. The reality of death is it's taboo in our culture still.
Mm.
And that's crazy. It's
Yeah, it's like we almost became too precious to die
Mm,
or to consider death
yeah,
as a part of a cycle.
mm,
Yeah.
yeah.
yeah. And so, the resilience that I see in our children around that is really lovely. They have such caring
Mm,
natures, don't they?
yeah, they really do.
They're all very connected to creatures, both large and small. I think it's the life cycle that's so important to get
Mm,
back to
Mm.
real stuff.
yeah, I actually have a story that reflects what Laura's saying. My son was going to just started uni, and he and a couple of mates thought, well, how are we going to budget for this? So they thought, well, let's take our own meat. So like they weren't mucking around. Like they thought, well, somehow they got hold of a few, like 5 sheep, and they actually took them all to Perth in frozen, but they killed them themselves.
Uh-huh.
And in fact, one of his, and as Laura was saying, our kids are super respectful on while the animal's alive and the process of the killing and processing of them as well. But his friend was basically, he'd never been involved in killing anything in his life. So it's like you're talking an 18-year-old boy that's a young man. And he helped my son. And I thought, well, that's an amazing, for a kid to actually get involved with that, and had a whole lot of respect for him to be prepared, because if I'm going to eat this, I'm going to help with this. I'm just going to stand back and pull it out of a freezer. But it wasn't that. It was actually his mum later on when we saw his mum. She said, Tom was super amazed at how respectful and, that the whole process was. And I thought,
Mm.
wow, that's really interesting coming from someone that's never been involved with killing an animal before.
It
I was
speaks
super
to the
proud of
fact
my
that
son to know that that was how he went through that process.
how special to have a different story than the
Mm,
one often told about how horrific it is. And there
yeah.
are really horrific
Mm,
operations, right?
Oh
It's
gosh.
a
Oh yeah.
reality, but it's often the only side of a story we see. And that kind of a story just reminds us there are many ways to do all things,
Yes,
great and not so great.
absolutely. We find industrial agriculture abhorrent and
Yeah.
factory farming. We're all in agreement that that has to end. The sooner the better. But yes, we can either harm or we can heal.
Yeah, absolutely. And I know for both of you in the management of the farm and the food that comes from it, waste is a very passionate subject. Can you talk us through some of the ways that you've personally on the farm managed to minimise waste as farmers? Because when we look at the waste stats, You think, gosh, yes, we at home apparently, on average, waste around 25% of our food, just goes in the bin. Unfortunately, a frightful percentage of that also goes to landfill with so few people composting or worm farming at this point. But then the waste is huge. And a lot of farmers are like, well, what do you want me to do? Because no one's making it easy for me to get this stuff to people and not waste with, you know, things like supermarkets, stringent aesthetic policies. And I mean, the list goes on, right, for all the reasons that waste happens in farms. But how have you guys tackled it?
Well, we try to close the loop wherever we possibly can. Lawson is compost king, so he
Awesome.
yeah 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 he is in charge of recycling all of our organic waste. With our chicken operation, for example, we have 450 laying hens, which is a very small chicken egg farm. I think a lot of people wouldn't even say that's a farm, but I can tell you that 450 hens is
Feels
enough.
like it. Yep.
Yeah, it is enough.
High maintenance ladies, huh?
Yeah,
Bless them.
sure.
And we raise those birds being organic. We raise them from their first day of life. That's another part of the puzzle. But at the end of their career, which is only actually 18 months, we then we do process our birds into the highest quality product we possibly can. So we make amazing gluten-free, free, 100% natural sausages using our own homegrown herbs, and they're
Yum.
absolutely beautiful. We put the skin in as well, so you know, collagen rich, just beautifully real. We make sure that we're using every bit of the animal possible. We honor the whole. We're using feet and wings and necks. We put those into broth packs so that our customers can make beautiful, delicious golden stocks and soups. And we also keep the frames too for that purpose. So we're making sure that we use everything that we possibly can. We obviously also, in the process of production, get seconds eggs, which, you know, they may be really small, really massive, may look lumpy, bumpy, have inconsistencies on the shells, which, you know, don't matter to us because we know it's what's on the inside that matters, hey?
Absolutely.
But we use those and we value add to make a nutrient-rich pasta, and that's using the biodynamic wheat from a local farm in the wheat belt here in Western Australia, Eden Valley. They produce fabulous biodynamic grains, and interestingly, that it's the same grain that the chooks are eating.
Oh, wow.
So, yeah. Everyone
That is
gets good
quite a
food
good
here.
closed loop
Yeah.
example. Love
And
that.
and it's we love it because the area in which it's produced is upriver from one of our local rivers here. The Blackwood River runs down into Augusta at the end of the Cape here, and it has its source up in the very location that this farm is set. You know, those guys out there are doing the best they possibly can, having a much, much larger footprint on their farm than we ever do. But we love the fact that we're supporting them. And I don't know whether Lawson wants to speak to the farm behind the farm, because that's a really important concept when, especially when you are feeding your animals an input that is not coming from your farm. What are you therefore then saying? Yes, that's how I want the world to be.
A lot of us, again, it's the purity testing, right? You see pasture raised and everyone thinks that they can get some animal that's like literally never been fed anything other than what was on the farm. But that's just not the reality of farming.
Well, not with, sheep and cattle, sure, because they're herbivores, so there's no reason why they shouldn't just be.
Yeah.
But obviously,
But with
when you're
chickens,
talking chooks and pigs,
yeah.
we're talking a whole lot of grain for those guys to grow, and for obviously laying hens to produce an egg a day nearly, and for meat birds to grow to a certain size by the time they're 10 weeks old. You know, they need a lot of protein. It's protein in and protein out. So we call it the farm behind the farm. So that's part of the things that we talk to our people on our farm tours about, that it's not, you might see, as you mentioned, the terms of pasture raised or grass fed, pasture raised eggs or pork. Sure, they might be running around a farm, which is awesome for animal welfare. They're ticking the big boxes there, but it's what they're eating. So as Laura mentioned, the footprint of the farm, the amount of grain we use to feed our chooks, for example, it would take about the same size of our farm, so roughly 65 acres, to grow the amount of wheat that we use for our hens, but that's in the wheat belt. That's only a very small part of his farm, obviously, but it just gives you an example of what it takes for animals like poultry and pigs to survive when we're producing them for consumption.
And
There's
then if I can just interrupt there to ask a qualifying question, because this comes up a lot in internet chat on the subject, let's say, is, well, if you're growing all that food for the animals, well, why don't you just eat that food and then you've got more land to grow more? But the thing with that example is the chickens do a much better job of processing that grain to then up significantly the nutrient product that comes from them, which means you could eat less or use less food to feed more people, higher quality per gram, if that makes sense. Is that something
like their conversion rate for what they can turn grain into for an egg, for example, like you can eat one little egg and that pretty much that's a meal nearly.
And nutritionally, it's got all of those incredible it's our naturopath calls it the power bullet. It's like
well, and I think
it's your multivitamin.
Exactly. And it's easy to think about, like, if you had a piece of toast, you're hungry an hour later. If you have a really nutrient dense food like an egg, that could probably tide you over for a couple of hours, and I think people go, oh yeah, that's so true.
Also, it's the benefit, not only that, it's also the benefit, they're fertilizing our farm for us as well.
Yeah.
So there's layered effects on how the benefit they have to our farm. So we don't have to use fertilizers in the paddocks that the chooks have been in, because they've done that job for us. So
all of the amazing nitrogen they're providing. And also we feed them both in their grain mix and as a free choice mineral. They have biochar, which, as you know, for digestive health is excellent, not only for humans but for animals and birds too, and the minerals.
And because we make our not too many people make their own chook mixes, because it's a whole nother job, but we really want to know what our chooks are eating. So we also use seaweed meal, 2 types of rock dust, basalt and granite dust, which have all the rare earth minerals. So like for us, it's all about no chemicals, but it's also about nutrient density of our food, because that's where the human health aspect comes into it. That's massive, because we just don't have the minerals in our diet that we should have, because our soils are so old. The most fertile soils in the world are basalt-based soils, which are volcanic and quite young soils. And so those plants and the animals that live on those soils are the healthiest that you'll get. So what we try and do is introduce those minerals into our animals' diets. So therefore we're getting the benefit of that in their protein, but they also spread that around our paddocks for us.
I was going to say, so that ends
around.
It almost sort of creates a rehab program for the soil.
But they're also supercharging it on the way through. So it's available to the plants in their manure. So, and we also use basalt grit for the hens, because they need that for their digestion. So they're also using that as part of their daily forage as a free choice.
I founded Low Tox Life in 2009, and as the community grew, I started to identify areas that people needed structured learning. And that is when the first e-course, Go Low Tox, was born in 2014. Since then, I've worked with scientists and health professionals to bring you low-cost courses to help you shortcut your goals with whatever you're challenged by right now. So whether you're new to going low tox and you'd love a framework and some really helpful suggestions across 22 different topics covering everyday life, or maybe you're working on an inflammation picture and you just want some help to calm the farm, whether you're on a fertility journey, either having trouble or wanting to optimize, we literally have courses for these and more. Head to lowtoxlife.com, hit the course tab and enjoy. I want to ask about cost because expense and cost are some really interesting words, and I think it'd be a good place to finish to give people things to reflect on here. Like we have a situation where if you're trying to put kids through school, you know, that midlife period where your costs are the highest they are in your life, and therefore the expense of food feels more expensive than, say, if you were double income, no kids, let's say. And sometimes, especially at the moment, with the cost of living being particularly challenging for a number of reasons we don't need to unpack, most people know, but it can make people feel like, well, yeah, I know what the best food is to eat, and yes, that would be ideal, but I can't do that. And it makes people feel like either resentful or feel like a bit of a failure, like I can't give my family like the food that I know is the best type of food. How do you reconcile expense and cost, and use things like relocalisation of food system to increase a sense of and a reality of prosperity?
It's a good question.
I know
And
it's a bit complicated,
Yeah,
but
yeah,
yeah.
it's yeah, it's a doozy. Relocalizing our food systems to give our communities that resilience, taking away all the middlemen's, they're the ones that are actually benefiting from the work that's done at our end,
From the eater and the farmer.
on the
Yeah.
farm. Um, that's really really important, and that's why we only stock our local independents rather than supermarkets, because we want to support local businesses that are mums and dads just doing the best they can, just like we are. Personally, we are very low income, and despite having the blessings of living on land, we have a mortgage and five hungry mouths, and I guess personally we have made sacrifices, and we have always, one of our biggest values is food. That's what comes top of the list for us, and we might not have
Yeah.
all of the subscriptions that we would like, and we might not
Oh,
be able to.
I totally agree, Laura. I literally said to my teenager a couple of months ago, do you want me to cook 2 chooks for dinner so that we've got so that you and your 16-year-old beanstalk situation has enough food for a couple of days.
Yeah.
But, that's the decision between that and the extra pair of kicks.
Sure.
So do you want to feed your belly good food or have the latest, greatest of everything? That is a choice.
Yes.
Yeah, we have to reprioritize as a society. It's been shown that we've never spent less than we do right now as a percentage of our disposable incomes on food. And
that's that's a powerful stat, isn't it?
It's really yeah.
So part of this is
what,
actually a perception issue then.
It is, yes, and a housing crisis, and all sorts of
all the things,
things. But we need to start reprioritizing food. It's what gives us health. It's what makes our cells. We've got to be doing this. It's not just our physical body health, it's our mental health. We believe in it so much.
It flows right down the line, doesn't it? The healthy farm creates healthy water for the rivers that run through most of the cities, and so without that, so that's what I guess that's a big part of what we talk about is we're looking after a part of the Margaret River catchment that flows through town. If everyone in town loves their river and they don't want algae blooms and they don't want nutrient flows, it's like, well, okay, that's how do you do that? That's how you support a farmer like us that's ticking those boxes for your water. So it has such big implications that I guess that's part of the priorities, isn't it? If that's what you would like, then you do have a choice to for those things to be more.
I love that, Lawson, because
healthy.
that really steps out for people that you often think, water's gone to shit and the tap water's awful and you can see how dirty our rivers are. It's like, well, I think often people struggle to then join the dots because so many people in urban landscapes are completely disconnected, cut off, haven't been taught, shown how you join the dots to the source of the problem.
Yeah, for sure. And that's what I guess, like Laura mentioned before, that's what one of the things we're most proud of, that our footprint, it's not just here, 350 k's away where the wheat's grown for our animals. Their 3,000 acre farm is looking after the Blackwood River. So imagine if that was multiplied by, so
and it's really
yeah.
exciting, even on our stretch of our tributary of the Margaret River. We have shown that we're cleaning up the water in the few hundred meters that we have it passing through our patch. And so, it's all possible. We can all do it. And when we join together and work as that village, as humankind, then anything's possible.
Consumers ultimately have such a massive part to play in this, as we first started talking. And natural sequence farming is a massive part of that, slowing the movement of water down, and that we learnt about that, how to do that in our waterway. So if we can slow the water down, there's more time for the water to be filtered through the soil and the plants. So therefore that water that's coming out of our farm is going to be way cleaner than it was before we started doing any of our sort of farming practices. So
and way more useful and way less harmful.
Yep.
We have this situation where water has become so harmful because we are not set up to receive it. So a last question, what next for you guys? What do you look towards in the future and think that's the next thing we're working on?
It's just more of the same. More trees for Lawson.
More trees for Lawson. Okay, good.
Yeah, he's out every single moment that he possibly can at the moment, putting trees and shrubs and biodiversity in the ground. For me, more community, bringing more people onto the farm, engaging them with just the simple things. The next couple of weeks we're at the Grounded Food and Farming Festival.
Oh, wonderful.
Sharing good messages of agriculture, and I'll be talking about food waste with a couple of food waste heroes, a fellow regen farmer, Mitch East from Willara Gold. He grows passion fruits, and he's found a fabulous way of using his surplus and any seconds.
And how's he doing that?
He's creating some beautiful craft sodas, which is a
fab.
idea. Yes, and a local baker is making bread from spent grains from the local brewery, and putting awesome things like spent coffee grounds into his breads too. And he also uses the Eden Valley biodynamic wheat for his rye that he puts coffee grounds in. There's some great people locally doing good things. So we love sharing the news, the good news.
Awesome. And there's nothing like a festival to just bring people together and you get to see and hear all those stories. It just makes you feel so good that so many good things are happening, I think. Yeah. Well, thank you for the work you both do on the land, and such ecological superstars. So we really appreciate the work you do to feed your community and beyond. And it's always just so wonderful speaking with farmers, and it's been lovely getting to know you both.
Bless you, Alex. Thanks so much.
Thanks, Alex.
Thank you for joining us in listening to this week's show. If you're not already subscribed or following the show on whatever platform you listened, please do that now. It helps enormously in terms of getting this show out to more people. Another way you can connect and support the work we do so that we can support you in your low tox life is join us in the Low Tox Club. You'll get access to amazing member masterclasses where we invite some of our best show guests for a live Q&A with members. You also have great shopping discounts from low tox businesses and, honestly, the nicest low tox community Facebook group that exists on the internet. I do hope you join us there. It costs just the price of a coffee a month on average. Head to lowtoxlife.com, hit the Explore tab, and Low Tox Club is the first option there. Thank you so much for listening, and we'll see you next week.